Hello, dear friends. I would like to congratulate you on the beginning of 2026. As of January 1st, we are reviewing the current battlefield map. There have not been many significant changes over the past 24 hours. However, on a number of directions, important local shifts have been recorded which, taken together, indicate that the overall dynamics along the line of contact remain intact. Before moving directly to the map, let us briefly touch on the political background, as it directly reflects what is happening on the battlefield. In Volodymyr Zelensky's New Year address, as in previous years, the presentation was more emotional, well-structured, and clearly aimed at a domestic audience. However, a careful analysis of the content makes it clear that the key semantic emphasis has shifted. Not a single mention of victory was made in the address. The word peremoa was not used at all. At the same time, the word peace was repeated many times. However, it was clearly stated that this is not peace on any terms. In practical terms, this means that the prospect of a negotiated settlement continues to be pushed further away, and the main scenario for future developments is still determined exclusively by the situation on the battlefield. This thesis fully confirms the forecasts made earlier. Key decisions will not be made at the negotiating table, but through combat operations. We now move directly to the situation at the front, and traditionally begin with the southern sector. Kharkiv direction. In the southern sector overall, relative stability remains, but it is precisely here that localized changes have been recorded. Along the Kharkiv direction, fighting continues along the entire line of contact. According to incoming information, the settlement of Novodanilivka has fully returned under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. Previously, Russian units had established positions in the southern part of this settlement. However, at present they have withdrawn, and the entire area that had previously been designated as a combat zone has come under Ukrainian control. At the same time, the intensity of strikes remains high. Active FPV drone launches are being recorded both against Novodanilivka and against the eastern part of Mala Tokmachka. The reasons for the withdrawal of Russian units from Novodanilivka have not been officially disclosed. It cannot be ruled out that this represents a redistribution of forces and assets toward higher priority sectors, particularly the southern Zaporizhzhia direction, where Russian offensive actions have recently been gaining momentum. It should be noted that several settlements lie ahead along the southern Zaporizhzhia axis. If the Lukyanivsky area is also taken into account, where heavy fighting is already underway, the total number of potential objectives reaches 6. Russian units continue their offensive actions, and as more detailed information becomes available, this sector will require a separate, in-depth analysis. Hulipole direction. We move on to the Hulipole direction, which remains one of the key areas in the south. Over the past week, the Russian army has completed the full clearing of Hulipole, and the settlement has come under its control. This corresponds with previously received information and does not contradict data from earlier reports. At present, combat operations have shifted south of Hulipole. Russian units continue advancing in a southwesterly direction toward Zaliznikne. Active pressure is being applied simultaneously along several vectors, towards Zelin, Svitlopetrivka, and Zaliznikne. In addition to ground advances, intensive use of FPV drones has been recorded against Ukrainian armed forces positions in the listed settlements. Earlier reports also indicated that Zaliznikne had come under Russian control, which overall fits into the broader pattern of expanding the zone of control in this area. In a broader perspective, further development of the offensive in this direction may be linked to reaching the Konka River and subsequent advancement towards Zaporizhzhia along the indicated line. However, further dynamics here will largely depend on the situation in adjacent sectors and the overall operational environment. We now continue northward on the map and begin with the Dnipropetrovsk sector of the line of contact. No significant changes have been recorded in this direction recently. For more than a week, no confirmed information has been received regarding any notable advances by either side. Fighting continues along the entire front line but remains positional and attritional in nature. The sides engage in artillery duels and use drones. Yet the line of contact remains without meaningful shifts. Thus, the Dnipropetrovsk direction currently remains stable, without sharp breakthroughs or collapses of defenses, while continuing to require significant resources from both sides to hold positions. Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad direction. We move on to the Pokrovsk-Mirnohrad direction, where more noticeable changes have occurred over the past week. The Russian army has completed the clearing of the northern part of Mirnohrad. As a result, both Mirnohrad and Pokrovsk are currently under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. In addition, Rodinska has been fully cleared. Following this, Russian units continued offensive operations along several axes at once, from the direction of Pokrovsk, as well as from Rodinske toward the settlement of Hryshin. Active combat is currently underway on the southeastern outskirts of Hryshin. Part of these peripheral areas has already come under Russian control, and the advance deeper into the settlement continues. This sector is gradually turning into a zone of increasing pressure, where the Ukrainian side is forced to respond to constant attempts to expand the Russian zone of control. Doropilia salient. Next, we move to the Doropilia salient, which remains one of the most dynamic sections of the front. Over the past few days, the Russian army has completely cleared the settlement of Vilny, which has come under its control. A similar situation has developed with the settlement of Novoshakhova, which has also been taken under the control of Russian forces. In addition, the clearing of Sharkov has been completed. Despite the fact that no official statements had previously been made regarding this settlement, it had in fact already come under Russian control, and this information has now been confirmed. After consolidating on the achieved lines, Russian units continue offensive actions toward the settlements of Stepi and Novyi Donbass. At the same time, pressure is increasing on Sofivka. Fighting continues in the western part of this settlement. However, the southern and southeastern outskirts of Sofiivka are already under Russian control, where units have entrenched themselves and continue combat operations. Thus, the Doropilia salient is gradually expanding, forming a stable zone of control and creating prerequisites for further advances in this sector of the front. Kostiantynivka direction. As for the Kostiantynivka direction, no fresh confirmed information has been received at this time. No significant changes have been recorded on the map here. The situation remains tense, but without noticeable shifts in the line of contact. The absence of news from this sector usually indicates either positional confrontation or preparations by the sides for possible future actions. In any case, this sector requires constant attention, as it is closely linked to the situation on the Kramatorsk-Sloviansk direction. We now move to one of the key sections of the front, the Kramatorsk-Sloviansk direction. It is here that a significant portion of active combat operations is currently concentrated, and it is precisely this area that largely determines the overall operational picture on the central sector of the front. Kramatorsk direction. In the Kramatorsk direction, combat operations continue simultaneously in several settlements. Clashes are recorded in the areas of Orikovo-Vasilivka, Novomarkove, and Markova. Russian units are methodically expanding their zone of control while applying pressure on Ukrainian defenses across the entire width of the sector. A significant part of the settlement of Verolyubivka has already been cleared and is under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. A similar situation has developed with the settlement of Maiske, which has also come under Russian control. At present, the most intense fighting is taking place on the northwestern outskirts of Verolyubivka. At the same time, from the direction of Maiske, Russian units continue offensive actions toward Markov and Fedorivka. These maneuvers create additional pressure on Ukrainian defensive positions and force the Ukrainian side to disperse its forces across multiple directions. In addition to ground operations, unmanned aviation is being actively employed. Regular FPV drone launches are being recorded against Ukrainian unit positions in Verolyubivka, Fedorivka, Markove, Novomarkove, and Orikovo-Vasilivka. This indicates the systematic nature of the pressure and an attempt to deprive the opponent of the ability to stabilize its defenses. Northeastern sector, Pazino, Vasyukivka, and adjacent areas. Let us shift slightly northeast to the area of the settlements of Pazino, Vasyukivka, Bondarne, and Kromivka. The situation here remains extremely tense. From the directions of Bondarne and Nikiforivka, the Ukrainian army is attempting counter-offensive actions toward Pazino and Vasyukivka. At present, fierce fighting is unfolding between Bondan and Vasyukivka, as well as west of Pazino. These engagements are meeting battles in nature, with active use of artillery and drones by both sides. At the same time, northeast of Pazino, Russian units continue the systematic clearing of the designated area. Gradually, this zone is coming under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and offensive actions are developing westward toward Nikiforivka. Thus, despite counterattack attempts, overall initiative in this sector remains with the Russian side. Sloviansk direction. We move on to the Sloviansk direction. Here, most of the settlement of Zakotne is already under the control of the Russian army. At present, fighting continues in the southeastern and northwestern parts of this settlement, where Ukrainian units are attempting to hold individual positions. From the direction of Reznikivka, attempts by the Ukrainian army to conduct counter-offensive actions toward the center of Sviatopokrovsk were recorded. The presence of Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance groups was noted, as a result of which fighting unfolded both in the central part of the settlement and on its western outskirts. At the same time, it should be emphasized that the settlement of Sviatopokrovsk itself generally remains under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Over the past several days, territories here have not changed hands, and the operational initiative continues to remain on the side of the Russian army. No fundamentally new information has emerged from this sector over the past 48 hours, which may indicate a temporary stabilization of the line of contact. Kranoliman direction. We now move on to the Kranoliman direction, where an expansion of the zone of control in favor of the Russian army is also being recorded. In particular, advances have been noted between the settlements of Yarova and Sosnov. The eastern part of Sosnov has been cleared and has come under the control of Russian units. From the direction of Yarova, offensive actions towards Sosnov continue. At present, fighting is underway in the western part of Yarova, as well as on the southeastern outskirts of this settlement. At the same time, the northern part of Yarova is fully under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. As for the advance toward Korovyi Yar, all territories previously designated as grey zones were cleared long ago and are now under Russian control. At present, combat operations continue in the areas of Kharkivka, Korovyi Yar, Oleksandrivka, Yarova, Drobyshev, and Lyman. Positions of the Ukrainian armed forces in these settlements are regularly struck using FPV drones, which significantly complicates the Ukrainian side's ability to regroup and maintain defensive lines. We now move further to the northeastern sector of the front and begin with the Izium direction. Here, a gradual expansion of the zone of control in favor of the Russian army is currently being recorded west of the settlement of Kharkivka. Fighting continues directly in the center of this settlement, where the sides are engaged in fierce clashes for key positions. As for the Borova area, in the vicinity of this settlement, to the northeast, intense fighting continues in forest belts and open fields. It is precisely here that the Ukrainian side previously established a developed system of fortified areas and trenches, which significantly complicates any advance. As a result, combat operations here are protracted and extremely intense, without sharp breakthroughs, but with constant pressure from Russian units. Otherwise, no significant changes have been recorded on the Izium direction in recent days. Kupansk direction. We now move on to the Kupansk direction, where the situation remains complex and dynamic. As of today, the battlefield map here has been refined and now appears more accurate. All territories marked in yellow are currently under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces, and it is precisely in these areas that Ukrainian counteroffensive actions continue. At the same time, it is important to emphasize that the northwestern part of Kupansk has not come under Ukrainian control. All of this territory currently remains under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and the zone of control held by Russian units has even expanded. Earlier, the Ukrainian side undertook counteroffensive actions toward Kupiansk, and at a certain stage, a significant part of the settlement of Moskovka was under Ukrainian control. However, as of today, fresh and confirmed information has been received indicating that the situation has changed. Almost all of Moskovka, including its northwestern, northeastern, and eastern outskirts, as well as the central part of the settlement, has come under the control of Russian units, Offensive actions are currently continuing toward the southwestern part of Moskovka, where a pocket of resistance remains. At the same time, the Ukrainian army continues counter-offensive attempts in the southwestern part of this settlement, as well as actions toward the center and in the direction of Holubivka. Thus, the Kupiansk direction remains a zone of active meeting engagements, where the line of contact may shift depending on the tactical successes of the sides. Veliki burluk direction. Next, we move to the Veliki burluk direction. Here, an expansion of the zone of control in favor of the Russian army is also being recorded. South of Dvorichanske, all territories previously marked in red have come under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. At present, offensive actions are underway toward Kolodiazny from the directions of Krasnopershe, Dvorichanske, and Otradne. At the same time, strikes by Russian aviation are being recorded against a number of settlements, including Petroivanivka, Mitrofanivka, Novovasilivka, Novozhevinivka, Obukivka, and Hrihorivka. At this time, no large-scale ground fighting has been recorded directly within these settlements. However, the presence of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups has been confirmed in the vicinity of Kolodiazny, as well as active use of FPV drones against Ukrainian unit positions in this area. As for the settlements of Katniev and Ambane, the situation there remains unchanged. They continue to be under the control of the Ukrainian army, and no noticeable shifts have been recorded in this sector so far. Kharkiv direction. We now move to the Kharkiv direction, where changes in favor of the Russian army have also been recorded recently. The zone of control west of the Vovchansk hamlets has expanded. Territory previously designated as a combat zone has come under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and offensive actions are now continuing deeper into the Vovchansk hamlets. Combat operations are unfolding directly in the central part of this settlement. The Russian army is applying constant pressure, pushing Ukrainian units out and actively employing FPV drones against their positions both in the center and on the eastern outskirts of the Vovchansk hamlets. As for the city of Vovchansk itself, it is fully under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. The line of contact is gradually being pushed away from the city. The closest areas to Vovchansk that remain under Ukrainian control are mainly forest belts and open fields without developed fortifications, making counter-offensive actions from those areas unlikely. Thus, Vovchansk has been firmly secured under Russian control, and the line of contact has been pushed back both toward Vilcha and in the direction of Lyman and the Vovchansk hamlets. In the near term, a return of combat operations directly into Vovchansk appears highly unlikely. At the same time, fighting continues in the areas of Simonivka and Hravska. From the direction of Lyman, Russian units continue offensive actions, accompanied by FPV drone strikes against Ukrainian positions in the settlements of Simonivka, Hravska, and Prylipka. We now move to the Sumy direction, where changes along the line of contact in favor of the Russian army have also been recorded today. This sector of the front remains one of the most illustrative in terms of the overall problem of manpower shortages on the Ukrainian side. At present, it has been confirmed that the settlement of Andriivka has been fully cleared and has once again come under the control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Let me remind you that Andriivka had previously already been under Russian control, but was temporarily lost during Ukrainian counter-offensive actions in the summer. Today, this settlement has once again been returned under Russian control. Following the completion of the clearing of Andriivka, combat operations shifted to adjacent areas. Fighting is ongoing to the north and east of Kondrativka, as well as south of Oleksivka and Vorozhina. Russian units continue to apply pressure, preventing the Ukrainian side from stabilizing its defenses. At the same time, the development of offensive actions has been recorded from the directions of Yunakivka and Oleshny toward the settlements of Sadki, Marina, and Krapovshchina. FPV drone strikes are regularly carried out against Ukrainian unit positions in these settlements, as well as in Kondrativka. In addition, strikes are also recorded against territories south of Vorozhina and Oleksivka, where Ukrainian fortified areas and trench systems are located in forest belts and fields. As for the settlements of Kotin, Pisarivka, Mala Korchakivka, Korchakivka, and Novosich, the presence of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups has been noted. At the same time, no large-scale ground combat operations have yet been recorded in these areas. However, airstrikes are being recorded against Ukrainian unit positions in the listed settlements. The main activity remains concentrated further north, in the areas between Oleksivka and Vorozhina, as well as in the zone of Mala Korchakivka, and Novosich. Overall, the intensification of combat operations on the Sumy direction does not indicate preparations for a large-scale offensive directly towards Sumy. Rather, it reflects a systemic shortage of resources on the Ukrainian side. Even holding secondary directions is proving extremely difficult for the Ukrainian armed forces, forcing them to constantly redeploy reserves and expose neighboring sectors of the front. Overall assessment. Summing up today's briefing, it can be noted that the line of contact as of January 1st, 2026, remains extremely tense along almost its entire length. In a number of directions, an expansion of the zone of control in favor of the Russian army is being recorded, while in others, positional confrontation persists without sharp changes. The political background set by the new year addresses only underscores the current reality. Despite frequent references to peace, there are no real prerequisites for a rapid negotiated settlement. The key thesis of peace, not on any terms, effectively means the continuation of the conflict and the transfer of all decisive outcomes to the battlefield. Thus, 2026 begins under conditions of ongoing combat operations, high intensity in a number of sectors, and the absence of clear signals toward de-escalation. We will continue to closely monitor developments, update the battlefield map, and inform you of all confirmed changes. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new releases and can always stay up to date with the latest developments. I wish you a happy new year and sincerely hope that in the coming year, combat operations will nevertheless come to an end, and that the negotiation process will gradually move in a constructive direction.